My journey to this stage didn't begin with a word of encouragement. It began with a slammed door. My parents told me my dream was a fantasy and cut me off completely. They said it was time I learned to be independent. But what happens when the people who are supposed to be your safety net are the very reason you're falling? Let me know what you would do in the comments below. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how I built my own world from the ground up. My future arrived on a Tuesday, tucked inside a crisp cream-colored envelope that felt impossibly heavy in my hands. The embossed seal of the Meyer School of Art and Design seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I remember standing at the mailbox at the end of our manicured lawn, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just paper and ink. This was validation for every secret pre-dawn hour I'd spent teaching myself to code, every sun-drenched Saturday I'd poured into my digital portfolio while my friends were at football games. I clutched the letter to my chest like a holy relic and ran the manic thumping of my heart, drowning out the sound of the neighborhood lawnmowers. I burst into the kitchen, a whirlwind of adrenaline and hope. The room smelled of lemon polish and quiet ambition. My mother, Susan, was meticulously polishing the already gleaming granite countertop, her movements precise and contained. My father, Mark, sat at the head of the table, hidden behind the rustling fortress of the Wall Street Journal, and my younger brother, Leo, was the center of his own universe, carefully peeling the protective film off the screen of a brand new silver MacBook Pro, an early graduation gift for his acceptance into Ohio State's business program. The scene was so perfectly painfully them. The timing felt like a line from a Greek tragedy. I got in. I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with an excitement that felt foreign in that sterile room. My mother stopped her polishing, turning with a smile that was all mechanics and no warmth. My father slowly, deliberately lowered his newspaper. His eyes, magnified by his reading glasses, held no curiosity, only appraisal. "Let me see, honey," my mother said, wiping her hands on a dish towel before taking the letter from me as if it might be contaminated. "Meyer, huh?" My father grunted the words, tasting like something unpleasant in his mouth. "Isn't that the art thing?" Leo looked up from his new machine, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's where you go to learn how to draw cartoons, Dad," he quipped, before turning his attention back to the glowing screen. "Hope you get good at drawing little leaves on lattes, Clara. I hear that's a solid backup plan." I ignored him, my focus entirely on my parents. "It's so much more than that," I explained, my prepared speech tumbling out. "It's one of the best interactive design programs in the country. It's a direct path to a career in tech user interface design animation for major studios' game development." My father held up a hand, silencing me. The rustle of his newspaper as he folded it with surgical precision was the loudest sound in the room. "And how much," he asked, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "is this art thing going to cost us, Clara?" I swallowed hard. I told them the tuition figure. The silence that followed was a physical thing. It pressed in on me, heavy and cold. It was my mother who broke it, her voice a cascade of practiced pity. "Oh, Clara, honey, you have to be realistic," she sighed, stepping forward to pat my arm. "That's an astronomical amount of money for a hobby." Then came the verdict delivered by my father, with the detached finality of a judge sentencing a stranger. "We're not paying for it," he said, his eyes unwavering. He gestured with his chin toward my brother. "Leo is pursuing a real career, a stable future that will provide for a family. His education is a sound investment. This," he waved a dismissive hand at the letter in my mother's grasp, "is a gamble, a fantasy." He leaned forward, a grim set to his jaw. "If you want to chase this whim, you'll do it on your own. It's time you learn to be independent." He said the word like he was knighting me, granting me some profound gift. But all I heard was the clang of a closing door, the finality of a lock turning. I heard abandonment. My gaze drifted to Leo. He was staring utterly captivated at his new laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard as if he couldn't hear the world crumbling around me. In that single searing moment, that shiny silver machine on the table between us became a monument to my family's priorities. My future was a frivolous fantasy, his a sound investment. I stood there mute as the blood drained from my face. The cream-colored letter felt as flimsy and worthless as my dreams were in their eyes. The world I thought I knew, the one with an unspoken foundation of parental love and support, had just disintegrated, crumbling into a fine gray dust at my feet. I turned without another word, the sound of my own footsteps unnaturally loud on the polished hardwood floor. The chapter of my life as their daughter was over. The chapter of my independence had just begun. The 2 weeks between the verdict and my high school graduation were a masterclass in performance art. My parents, having rendered their judgment, proceeded as if the conversation had never happened. Our house became a stage, and we were all actors in a play called The Happy Successful Family. At the dinner table, my father would praise my final grades, and my mother would talk about the graduation party she was planning, all while the rejection of my dream hung between us, a thick, suffocating fog that no one dared acknowledge. The graduation party was the grand finale. Our backyard was filled with neighbors and family friends, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and grilled hot dogs. Mrs. Henderson from next door, a woman with a Ph.D. in neighborhood business, cornered my mother by the azaleas. "Oh, Susan, what a wonderful day!" She chirped, her eyes gleaming. "Ohio State for Leo, such a sensible boy. And where is our little artist Clara off to in the fall?" I watched my mother's smile tighten almost imperceptibly. "Oh, you know Clara," she said with a breezy laugh, waving a dismissive hand. "She's so creative, so free-spirited. She's decided to take some time off, to find herself, be independent before settling into a proper career." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I felt a cold wave of nausea. My best friend Sarah found me hiding by the drink table, her expression full of concern. "I can't believe them," she whispered, her voice fierce. "Are you really okay, Clara? You know my parents would let you stay with us. You wouldn't have to go anywhere." I looked at Sarah, my fierce, loyal friend, and felt a pang of love and sadness. "I know," I said, and my voice was thick with emotion. "But I can't. If I stay, I'll just be depending on someone else. My dad said I need to be independent, so I guess I'm going to show him what that really looks like." That night, after the last guest had gone and the house was finally quiet, the full weight of my decision settled on me. To stay would be to die a slow death by 1,000 paper cuts of their disapproval. Austin, Texas. The name itself sounded like freedom. It became a beacon in my mind, a city of vibrant art, innovative tech, and unapologetic weirdness. It was the antithesis of Northwood, Ohio. It was a place where maybe, just maybe, I could belong. But independence, as my father defined it, required capital. The few $100s from my library job wouldn't cover a bus ticket and a security deposit. My eyes landed on the one thing of value I owned. It sat on my bookshelf, nestled in a worn leather case, a vintage Leica M3, my grandfather's camera. He'd given it to me a month before he passed, his frail hands guiding mine. "Capture the world's beauty, Clara," he'd rasped. "Don't just look at it, see it." Selling it felt like a sacrilege. It felt like selling a piece of my own soul. I sat on my bedroom floor for hours, the cool, solid metal of the camera in my hands, tears tracking silently down my face, but the desperate clawing need to escape it was stronger than the guilt. With trembling fingers, I listed it on a collector's forum. The buy now notification came through less than an hour later. $800 appeared in my PayPal account. It was a cold, digital, impersonal transaction for a priceless piece of my heart. That was my seed money. That was the price of my freedom. The night before I left, I found Leo in the den, bathed in the blue light of his new MacBook. He was already mapping out his course schedule for OSU's business school. "You're really going through with this?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the screen. He didn't sound angry, just bewildered. "I just don't get it, Clara. Why do you have to make everything so hard on yourself?" His question was so dense with smug superiority, so blind to the reality that they were the ones making it hard, that I didn't have the energy to respond. The chasm between our worlds was too vast to shout across. "Be good, Leo," I said softly, and left him to his bright, pre-approved future. I didn't leave a note. I didn't give them the stage for one last dramatic scene. I walked out of that silent house before dawn, a single heavy backpack slung over my shoulder, and a one-way bus ticket clutched in my hand. I didn't look back. As the Greyhound bus pulled away from the gritty Cleveland station, I watched the familiar gray skyline shrink in the window until it was just a smudge on the horizon. A wave of pure, uncut terror washed over me so intense it made me dizzy, but underneath it, buried deep, was a tiny, fierce spark of something else, hope. It was the exhilarating, terrifying feeling of a blank page. For the first time, I was no longer just Mark and Susan's daughter. I was Clara Evans, and I was for better or for worse on my own. Austin in August wasn't just hot, it was a furnace. The moment I stepped off the Greyhound, the humidity wrapped around me like a wet wool blanket, stealing the air from my lungs. My first heady taste of independence tasted like sweat diesel fumes and the gnawing anxiety of having nowhere to go. The $800 from my grandfather's camera, my entire net worth, vanished with terrifying speed. A shady landlord on Craigslist took half of it for a security deposit and the first month's rent on a tiny, dingy apartment that smelled vaguely of mildew and broken dreams. My roommate was a musician named Maya, a girl with wide, perpetually glazed-over eyes, and a guitar that she treated with more care than her personal hygiene. She paid her share of the rent in sporadic, unpredictable installments, usually after a good busking session downtown. The apartment's other, more permanent residents were a thriving community of cockroaches whom I learned to view not as pests, but as silent, unwelcome landlords. This was the glorious freedom I had run toward. My life quickly fell into a grueling, soul-crushing rhythm. My mornings began at 5 a.m., preparing for my 6 o'clock shift at a trendy coffee shop called The Daily Grind. There I'd force a smile while serving $5 lattes to tech bros in expensive sneakers who loudly discussed disruption and seed rounds. "Excuse me," one of them said to me one morning, pointing a disdainful finger at his cup. I asked for a Rosetta. "This looks more like a blob. Can you redo it?" I just nodded, my insides coiling into a tight, bitter knot. I spent my days creating disposable art for people who didn't even see the person making it. My nights were spent at Lou's Late Night, a greasy spoon diner on the edge of town. From 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., I slung hash browns and refilled coffee for truckers, insomniac students, and lonely people from the night shift. My shoes were perpetually sticky with spilled soda, and my hands were raw and chapped from the industrial-strength sanitizer and scalding dishwater. Sal, the grizzled pot-bellied cook, would occasionally slide me a plate of mistake pancakes. "Eat up, kid," he'd grumble, not looking at me. "You look like a damn ghost." It was the closest thing to kindness I received most days. In the 3 precious hours between my shifts, I would collapse onto my lumpy mattress too tired to even shower. Some nights the exhaustion was so profound, I'd just sit and stare at the water-stained wall, the ghost of my father's voice whispering independent in my ear. He'd made the word sound so noble. Out here it just felt like a synonym for alone. There were moments I almost broke. I remember one particularly brutal Saturday, a double shift at both jobs. It started raining on my long walk home, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through my thin jacket. As I passed a row of charming little bungalows, I glanced through a brightly lit window. Inside, a family was sitting around a dinner table laughing. A father was ruffling his son's hair. A mother was passing a bowl of what looked like spaghetti. The warmth of it, the simple, effortless belonging. It was like a punch to the gut. The ache in my chest was so sharp, so physical, it literally took my breath away. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick with rain. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact photo. All I had to do was press it. I could surrender. I could go home. but then I saw my father's face in my mind's eye. The cool satisfaction, the smug, I told you so look. I saw my mother's pitying smiles. The humiliation would be 1,000 times worse than the hunger and the exhaustion. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and kept walking. The next day, I took $50 money I desperately needed for groceries and walked into a dusty, cluttered pawn shop. In a glass case next to a collection of sad-looking power tools was a used, beat-up graphics tablet. It was an ancient Wacom model, the kind of thing the students at Meyer would have laughed at. But to me, it was a lifeline. That night, after a 16-hour workday that had stripped me of everything but my bones, I came home, plugged it in, and installed the drivers on my cheap second-hand laptop. The glow of the screen pushed back the oppressive darkness of my tiny room. I opened a blank digital canvas, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I drew, I designed, I created. I poured all my loneliness, my anger, my quiet desperation into the strokes of the digital pen. This art wasn't for a grade or for a portfolio or for a condescending customer. It was for me. It was the one part of my life that was truly incandescently mine. In those stolen pre-dawn hours, I wasn't a waitress. I wasn't a barista. I wasn't my father's failed investment. I was an artist, and it was just enough to keep me going. For 2 years, the grind was my entire world. 2 years of stale coffee, sticky floors, and the gnawing loneliness that settles deep in your bones when you're invisible. I paid my bills. I survived. But I certainly wasn't thriving. The dream of Meyer of a life steeped in art and creation had faded into a distant sepia-toned photograph of a girl I no longer recognized. My world had shrunk to the 4 blocks between my apartment, the coffee shop, and the diner. One rainy Tuesday, huddled in the campus library of Austin Community College for the free Wi-Fi, I saw a flyer for night classes. My eyes scanned the list, accounting 101 Intro to Sociology, and then a title that snagged my attention, Introduction to Digital Ethics. It sounded serious. It sounded hard. It was the opposite of the mindless repetition of my daily life. On a whim, fueled by a tax refund and a desperate need to feel my brain work again, I enrolled. The classroom was under harsh fluorescent lights, filled with a motley crew of students. There were kids fresh out of high school, bored and scrolling on their phones, and a few older adults looking for a career change. I felt like an alien, a 20-year-old ghost with the weariness of someone much older. The professor was a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. She was a petite woman with sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish black-rimmed glasses and a presence that filled the entire room. She never used notes, pacing the front of the class like a caged panther dissecting complex theories with a terrifying, beautiful precision. "This is supposed to be an intro class, right? She's insane," a kid named Kevin, who sat behind me, muttered one night after Dr. Sharma had systematically dismantled his lazy argument about data privacy. Most students were terrified of her. I was utterly captivated. She didn't just teach, she challenged, she demanded excellence. For the first time in years, I felt awake. I poured everything I had into that class. I did the reading twice. I spent my 30-minute breaks at the diner scribbling notes in the margins of the textbook. For the final project, we had to design and present a theoretical framework for a new digital platform. While others did predictable presentations on a new social media app or a dating site, I locked myself away. I took all my quiet frustration, all my first-hand knowledge of the ways independent artists were exploited, and I channeled it. I designed a micro-licensing system, a decentralized platform for artists to securely license and sell their work, built on a foundation of transparency and creator empowerment. It was raw, it was ambitious, and it was the most honest thing I had ever created. The night I presented, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my notes. But as I started talking, a strange calm came over me. My voice, usually hesitant, grew steady. I wasn't just presenting a project. I was arguing for my own soul. When I finished, the room was quiet. "Miss Evans." Dr. Sharma said, her expression unreadable. "Please stay after class." My heart plummeted. Kevin shot me a pitying look. I was sure she was about to tear my entire concept to shreds. After the other students had filed out, I walked to her desk, my legs feeling like lead. She was looking at my submitted project paper, her pen tapping a silent rhythm. She looked up, peering at me over the rim of her glasses. "That," she said, her voice crisp and clear, "was not a student project, Miss Evans. That was a business plan." I stared at her, speechless. "It's raw, yes. The back end is a fantasy at this point," she continued, "but the core idea, the philosophy behind it, is brilliant." She tapped my student file on her desk. "It says here you're an undeclared major. That's incorrect." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto mine. "You're an entrepreneur who just doesn't know it yet. What are you doing working in a diner? A mind like yours is a terrible thing to waste on hash browns." No one had ever called my ideas brilliant before. Validation? From this woman I respected so immensely, it felt like a cool drink of water after 2 years in the desert. My eyes burned with unshed tears. She didn't offer pity. She offered action. Right there, she picked up her phone and made a call. "Jim, it's Anya Sharma," she said into the phone. "I'm sending a student over to you. Her name is Clara Evans. She has a real eye. Yes, for the bakery logo. See her tomorrow." The next day, I met with the owner of a small local bakery. It was a tiny gig designing a logo for his new line of gluten-free muffins, but it was the first time someone paid me for my art for my mind. When the $200 payment hit my account, it felt more real, more substantial than a year's worth of greasy tips. That Christmas, my mother called. The conversation was the usual painful script. She gushed for 10 minutes about Leo's prestigious internship with a major accounting firm in Cleveland. "He's doing so well, Clara," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "His supervisors just love him. They say he has a real future there." Then the inevitable condescending pivot. "And you, honey, are you still waitressing?" "I'm doing some freelance design work now, actually," I said, my voice tight, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. There was a pause. "Oh," she finally said. "Well, that's nice, dear. Every little bit helps, I'm sure. As long as you're happy, I suppose." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. The old familiar bitterness was there, a sour taste in the back of my throat. But this time, it was mixed with something new, something cold and hard and strong. Resolve. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in my head. "You're an entrepreneur." My mother's dismissive tone was no longer just an insult. It was fuel. They would never see me. It was finally truly time I stopped trying to make them. The idea that would become Etheria Studios wasn't a lightning bolt from a clear blue sky. It was a slow burn, a fever that built from 1,000 small frustrations, 1,000 moments of quiet injustice I saw all around me. It was born from the messy, vibrant, and often heartbreaking world of the creators I now lived among. The first real catalyst was my roommate Maya. She burst into our apartment one afternoon, her usual dreamy haze replaced by a furious, fiery energy. She threw her guitar case onto our lumpy couch. "They stole it, Clara," she yelled, her voice cracking. "My song, River of Ghosts. It's in that new Keep Austin Cool coffee commercial online. They didn't ask. They didn't pay me a dime. They just took it." I watched as she sank onto the floor, utterly dejected. "My cousin's a paralegal," she mumbled into her hands. "She said it would cost me thousands to sue them. More money than I'd ever get back, so they just get away with it." Her helpless anger became my own. A few weeks later, I was reviewing the contract for the bakery logo. It was a dense 6-page document full of incomprehensible legal jargon. I had to look up terms like in perpetuity and work for hire, realizing with a jolt of fear how easily I could have signed away all rights to my own work forever. The world I was learning was filled with brilliant, trusting creators, and the system was a finely tuned machine built to take advantage of them. My final project for Dr. Sharma's class ceased to be a theoretical exercise. It became an obsession. The blueprint for a platform where artists like Maya could be protected, where artists like me could be empowered. A place where a transparent blockchain-based system would let them license their work securely, tracking its usage and ensuring they were paid fairly. It was wildly ambitious. It was as my parents would have said, a complete fantasy. I started trying to build it myself. My life reoriented around this new purpose. My jobs at the diner and coffee shop became a necessary evil, a way to pay for rent and Wi-Fi. The ACC library became my real home. I spent every spare moment surrounded by thick textbooks on Python and JavaScript, my brain feeling like it was being physically rewired. It was a slow, clunky, agonizing process, and I failed far more than I succeeded staring at cryptic error messages until my eyes burned. One rainy Thursday night, I forced myself to go to a local tech meetup. It was held in a noisy, crowded bar downtown. I felt like a complete and utter fraud, a waitress playing dress-up as an innovator. I almost turned and left 5 times my hand on the door, my heart hammering with a vicious case of imposter syndrome. Finally, I cornered a small group and with a trembling voice tried to explain my idea. One guy in a slick Patagonia vest cut me off. "So it's like a stock photo site for music and art?" he asked, already looking over my shoulder for someone more important to talk to. "Yeah, that market's pretty saturated, honey. Good luck, though." He patted my arm condescendingly and moved on. The group dissolved. I was left standing alone, the sting of his dismissal feeling as sharp as a slap. And then, a voice quiet but clear cut through the noise. "You mentioned blockchain for the licensing ledger?" I turned. A man was standing there holding a half-empty beer. He was my age, maybe a little older, with an intense, focused gaze and a thoughtful expression that stood in stark contrast to the slick confidence of everyone else. He wasn't a tech bro. He was a builder. "Aren't you worried about transaction speed and gas fees for high-volume micro-licenses?" he asked. It was the first real question anyone had asked me all night. It was a question from someone who had actually listened. "I am," I admitted, my voice shaky with relief. "I was thinking of a layer 2 solution, maybe a state channel system, but my back-end coding is, well, it's not my strength." "The back-end is a mess," he said a few minutes later after I'd pulled up my pathetic prototype on my laptop. He said it not unkindly, but as a simple statement of fact. But the user-facing philosophy, the why of it, it's revolutionary. You're trying to build a decentralized trust system for the creative class. His name was Ethan. We talked for 3 hours that night, huddled at a sticky corner table, sketching out database schemas on a stack of bar napkins. He saw every flaw in my plan, but more importantly, he saw the soul of it. He understood. For the first time since leaving Ohio, I felt like I had found a true peer, an intellectual equal. I started my nerve almost failing me. "I'm probably crazy for asking, but would you maybe want to get coffee sometime to talk more about this?" A rare, genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his serious face. "I'd like that," he said. That coffee turned into a week of marathon sessions in his garage, a chaotic sanctuary filled with old computer parts and the hum of servers. We worked late into the night, fueled by cheap pizza and a shared obsessive passion. I would pace the concrete floor describing the user experience, the feel of the platform, the community I wanted to build. He would sit, hunched over his keyboard, his fingers flying, translating my vision into elegant, functional code. I had the vision. He had the architectural genius to bring it to life. We were a team. One night near dawn, he turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was the first real working line of code for our platform. Etheria was no longer just my dream. It was becoming real. Ethan's garage became our entire world. We transformed it from a dusty tomb of forgotten hobbies into the bustling, chaotic headquarters of Etheria Studios. The first weekend we whitewashed the oil-stained walls, the stark white paint feeling like a fresh canvas. We ran what felt like miles of Ethernet cables across the ceiling, tacking them into place with a staple gun. We set up 2 rickety folding tables as desks and spent a whole evening arguing, laughing about the best place to put the giant whiteboard we'd found on the curb. The space smelled of sawdust, the sharp scent of solder, and the ever-present aroma of stale burnt coffee. It was perfect. Our founding team was just the 2 of us. I was the CEO, the visionary, the one who obsessed over user experience and design aesthetics. Ethan was the CTO, the quiet, brilliant architect who could take my wild, chaotic ideas and translate them into clean, elegant, functional code. That first year was brutal. We poured every cent we had, and many we didn't, into the company. Our diet consisted of ramen noodles in a dozen different flavors, and our primary fuel was the unshakable, possibly delusional belief that we were building something important. My waitressing job at Lou's took on a new sacred purpose. Every crumpled dollar bill of my tips went into a glass jar labeled Server Fund. Our social life evaporated, replaced by 18-hour workdays and the intimate glow of our computer screens. And somewhere in the middle of all that stress and exhaustion, our partnership deepened into something more. It wasn't a choice. It was an inevitability. It happened organically in the quiet, unspoken moments between frantic coding sprints. It was in the way he'd leave a fresh mug of coffee on my desk in the morning, exactly how I liked it, without a word. It was in the way I'd spend hours redesigning a user interface based on a single, casual comment he'd made about button placement. We fell in love not over romantic dinners and candlelit conversations, but over late-night debugging sessions, strategic disagreements, and the shared vulnerability of chasing an impossible dream. Our first real date was celebrating our successful incorporation as an LLC. We sat on the cold concrete floor of the garage, splitting a $9 bottle of champagne, our faces lit by a single laptop screen. It was the most romantic night of my life. When we finally had a working prototype, we started pitching to investors. It was a masterclass in humiliation. I was a 22-year-old with a few community college credits and a resume that screamed diner waitress. They were without exception middle-aged men in expensive suits who looked at me like I was a curiosity. I'd walk into their glass-walled boardrooms, my heart pounding, and deliver my passionate pitch. They'd look at my meticulously designed deck, then at me, and their eyes would glaze over. "It's a niche market, isn't it?" one told me, dismissing the entire global community of independent artists with a bored wave of his hand. "I'm not seeing the aggressive monetization strategy," another said, frowning. "Where's the 5-year exit plan?" One rejection was particularly soul-crushing. His name was Mr. Sterling, a venture capitalist with cold blue eyes and a condescending smirk that was an uncanny echo of my father's. He let me go through my entire pitch without interruption. Then he leaned back in his enormous leather chair, a throne looking down on the city of Austin, and steepled his fingers. "Look, sweetheart," he said, the word dripping with venomous condescension. "It's a cute idea, really. But you're a painter, not a businesswoman. Business is a different animal. It's run by killers. You are not a killer. Come back when you have a man running the numbers." I walked out of that high-rise office building and onto the street, the city air feeling cold and hostile. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I ducked into an alleyway, my hands shaking, and called Ethan. My voice was a choked whisper. He called me sweetheart. I managed to get out the word, feeling like a physical slap. He said I wasn't a killer. Oh God, Ethan. Maybe they're all right. Maybe my dad was right all along. I'm just a girl playing dress-up. Ethan was silent on the other end for a long moment. Then his voice came through low and firm. "Where are you, Clara?" I told him the intersection. "Stay there," he commanded. "Don't move." 15 minutes later, his beat-up Toyota pulled up to the curb. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me it would be okay. He just leaned over, his expression grimly determined, and handed me his tablet. On the screen was the very first fully functional version of the Etheria login page. It was beautiful. It was clean. It was real. "He's wrong," Ethan said, his voice a low growl. "Sterling, your father. They're all wrong. What you have isn't a cute idea. It's a revolution. Now get in the car. We've got work to do." Fueled by a fresh wave of righteous anger, we drove straight to a coffee shop to meet with a small local angel investor. Dr. Sharma had connected us with a semi-retired tech pioneer named Genevieve Marks. She didn't have a high-rise office. She had kind eyes and asked questions about our mission, not our exit strategy. At the end of our conversation, she smiled. "I'm not investing in your financial projections," she said. "I'm investing in you. You have grit. "And you," she said, nodding at Ethan, "have the integrity to build it right." That night, she wired us our first pre-seed funding. It wasn't much by VC standards, but to us it was everything. It was enough. It was a start. With the seed money from Genevieve Marks in our bank account, we graduated from the garage. Our first official office was a single sun-baked room above a perpetually busy taco shop on the east side of town. The air was a permanent fragrant mix of old building dust cilantro and grilled onions. We filled it with mismatched furniture from Goodwill and a shared dream that felt both enormous and terrifyingly fragile. The official launch of Etheria was the quietest, most anticlimactic moment of my life. There was no press release, no champagne, no launch party. It was just me and Ethan at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, hunched over his laptop. "Ready?" he asked, his finger hovering over the enter key that would push the final piece of code live. "No," I said, my heart hammering. "Do it." He hit the key, and nothing happened. The world didn't change. We sat there in the quiet hum of our single server rack, watching the user count on our analytics dashboard, a perfect, beautiful 0. For an hour we just stared at it, the silence growing louder and louder. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Maya. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "So, that thing I've been working on, it's live. You wanna be the first?" "Heck yeah, Clara Bean!" she yelled into the phone, her voice tinny and distant. "Uploading my masterpiece right now? Hold on. Does it work on a cracked iPhone screen?" A minute later, the user count on the screen ticked over. 1. A single solitary user. Ethan and I looked at each other and broke into delirious, relieved laughter. Maya, my perpetually stoned, chronically late on rent former roommate, was Etheria's user hash 1. For weeks, it felt like we were shouting into the void. Users trickled in one by one, mostly local Austin artists we knew personally or had begged to join the platform. I spent my days writing blog posts nobody read and sending hopeful emails to artists who never replied. Ethan spent his days fixing bugs that only affected 3 people. We celebrated our 100th user by splitting a single, slightly stale cupcake from the bakery downstairs. "Only 999,900 more to go till we're a real company," Ethan joked, but his eyes were tired. We were burning through our seed money with almost nothing to show for it. The turning point came 3 months in on a sleepy Wednesday morning. Ethan was staring at our analytics graph. Clara," he said, his voice strange. "You should probably see this." The traffic line, usually a flat, sad little ECG, had suddenly shot straight up. It wasn't a spike, it was a vertical wall. While we were staring dumbfounded, the first error alert started pinging. Then 10, then 100, then our server monitor turned a terrifying solid red. We'd crashed. A frantic search online revealed the source. Marcus Thorne, a legendary, notoriously grumpy concept artist for a major video game studio, had written a blog post. He was famous for his rants against the predatory practices of big publishers. His latest post was about us. For years, he wrote, "We creators have been told to be grateful for the scraps the corporate overlords throw us. Etheria isn't asking us to be grateful. It's handing us the keys to the whole damn kitchen. It's quiet, it's a little buggy, and its founders probably haven't slept in a week. But make no mistake, this is a quiet revolution." The post had gone viral in the international online art community. Marcus Thorne had without warning pointed a fire hose at our little sandcastle. The next 6 hours were the most stressful, clarifying, and absolutely terrifying of my life. The office became a war room. Ethan, a grimly determined expression on his face, was a blur of motion, his fingers flying across the keyboard, working miracles on the command line, rerouting traffic, and scaling our capacity on the fly. I felt utterly useless on the technical side, a tidal wave of panic rising in my chest. But then I saw the torrent of angry, confused comments flooding our social media. My panic sharpened into purpose. I couldn't fix the servers, but I could talk to our new accidental community. I started posting updates, my fingers flying across my own keyboard. "Hi everyone," I wrote. "My name is Clara. I'm the co-founder of Etheria. Yes, we know we're down. It turns out a lot more of you showed up than we expected. We're a two-person team, and you found us all at once. Please bear with us. We're working on it, and we are so grateful you're here." By sunrise, the site was stable. We were exhausted, hollow-eyed, and smelled terrible. And our user count had jumped from a few hundred to over 10,000. We had survived our trial by fire. A few weeks later, I was on the phone with a reporter from Wired magazine. Her name was Jessica, and her questions were sharp and insightful. "So you're not just creating a tool," she said. "It sounds like you're trying to build a new kind of creative economy." As I explained our mission, our philosophy of empowering the individual artist, I heard the words coming out of my mouth not as a practiced pitch, but as my own hard-won truth. I realized this was it. We weren't just two people in a room above a taco shop anymore. We were a real company. That evening, long after the article went live and our user count climbed even higher, I stood at our single office window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. I thought about the scared, heartbroken 19-year-old girl who had arrived in this city with nothing but a backpack and a sold-off piece of her past. Now, I was the CEO of a company, my company. I thought about my father, about his cold dismissal, about the word he'd used as a weapon independent. He had meant it as a curse, a life sentence of struggle. But standing there in the quiet, steady hum of the servers that powered our dream, I realized with a sudden, breathtaking clarity, it had been the greatest gift he had ever given me. The next few years weren't a chapter. They were a whirlwind, a dizzying montage of growth that blurred the seasons together. Etheria, our garage-born dream, grew beyond our wildest imaginings. We moved out of the little room above the taco shop and into a sleek, sprawling space in a downtown Austin high-rise, a place with glass walls, ergonomic chairs, and a perpetually flowing kombucha tap that our employees loved. Our team grew from just me and Ethan to a vibrant, chaotic family of 50 engineers, designers, and community managers. My title was still CEO, but the substance of my days had transformed completely. I no longer spent my hours obsessing over pixel-perfect design or personally welcoming new artists to the platform. My life was a color-coded calendar managed by my sharp, efficient executive assistant, Ben. My days were a series of back-to-back board meetings, tense fundraising rounds with venture capitalists, and long-term strategic planning sessions. "Quick reminder, Clara," Ben's voice would crackle through my office intercom. "You have the quarterly review in 10, the call with the German investors at 11:30, and the Forbes photo shoot at 2. I was living the life I had once only dared to dream of, and I had never felt more profoundly lonely. The pressure was immense, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety beneath the surface of my skin. I was no longer just responsible for my own dream, but for the livelihoods of my 50 employees, for their mortgages and their kids' college funds. I was the guardian of the trust of our hundreds of thousands of users around the globe. I was featured in magazines Forbes' 30 under 30 inches Inc.'s Most Innovative CEOs. The articles always used the same glossy photo from that shoot, me smiling a cool, confident smile, looking powerful, looking in control. They never showed the real picture me at 2 a.m. in that same silent office, staring at a spreadsheet until my eyes burned a tight, cold knot of anxiety, twisting in my stomach, terrified that I was an imposter who was one wrong move away from losing it all. My relationship with Ethan changed, too. He was still my rock, our brilliant CTO and co-founder, but the easy, chaotic intimacy of the garage days was a distant memory. It had been replaced by scheduled weekly check-ins and tense budget meetings where we were no longer just Clara and Ethan, but the CEO and the CTO. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October, our anniversary. I completely forgot. I was trapped in a 5-hour emergency call with our legal team over a patent troll threatening a lawsuit. At 10 p.m., I finally stumbled out of the conference room, my brain fried. I found Ethan waiting for me in the silent, empty lobby of our building. He was holding a single, slightly wilting red rose. My heart fell to the floor. "Oh my God, Ethan, the reservation," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He looked at me and his eyes weren't angry. They were just tired, and that was so much worse. "I called Ben," he said, his voice gentle. "He said you were on a critical call. Everything's critical now, isn't it, Clara?" "I'm so sorry." I said the words, feeling pathetic and small. "The legal team, it was a mess. I lost track of time." "I know," he sighed, the sound echoing in the cavernous lobby. "It's always a mess. Clara, do you remember the garage? When we'd argue about a database schema until 3 in the morning, we were a team. We were in it together. Now I have to book a meeting in your calendar just to talk to you." The conversation that followed back in the beautiful minimalist apartment we barely spent any time in was painful and necessary. We laid it all bare, the distance, the feeling that we were becoming business partners who happened to live together. We had built a successful company, but we were neglecting to build our own life. We promised each other with tears in our eyes that we would do better. We would carve out protected space for just us, no matter what fires the company was fighting. And for a week we did. It felt like coming up for air. We left the office at a reasonable hour. We had dinner. We talked about things other than work. We started to find our way back to each other. Then a week later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "Congratulations, the Vanguard Awards." My heart pounded as I opened it. Etheria Studios had won Innovator of the Year. It was one of the most prestigious awards in the entire tech industry, our version of an Oscar. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to every single late night, every sacrifice, everything we had built. I felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated pride. I was about to shout for Ethan to come see when my eyes scanned down to the details of the awards gala. Location, the Intercontinental Hotel Grand Ballroom. City, Cleveland, Ohio. The words blurred. Cleveland, Ohio. An hour's drive from my parents' house. For 9 years, I had kept that part of my life locked away in a dark, soundproof room in my mind. I had never been back. I had never spoken of it. Now my past wasn't just knocking on the door. It was sending me a formal, engraved invitation. Suddenly the award felt less like a trophy and more like a summons. A gilded chain pulling me back to the place where my journey began, a place I had sworn I would never ever see again. The decision to go back was agonizing. It consumed our conversations for 2 days. A tense, circular debate played out in the sterile quiet of our apartment. My first instinct was pure primal avoidance. "Ben can go," I said to Ethan, pacing our living room floor. "He can accept it on the company's behalf, or we can send a pre-recorded video. That's what people do now, right?" I was babbling, my voice high and thin. Ethan watched me, his expression patient and understanding. "Clara," he said gently, stopping my frantic pacing by taking my hands in his. "You earned this award. Not Ben, not the company. You should be there to accept it." "It's not about the award, Ethan, you know that," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. It's them. It's in Cleveland." The name of the city felt like a curse word on my tongue. "I know," he said, his grip on my hands tightening just enough to feel like an anchor. "Which is why I'm going with you." He said it with a finality that left no room for argument. "You are not under any circumstances facing this alone." And just like that, the decision was made. To not go to hide in Austin, it felt like letting them win. It felt like proving them right, that I was still that scared little girl who couldn't face them. With Ethan by my side, it felt possible. Flying into Cleveland felt like traveling backwards in time. The sky was the same familiar, oppressive shade of battleship gray I remembered from my childhood. As we drove the rental car from the airport, the landscape of my youth unfolded outside the window like a sad, faded map. There was the strip mall where I'd had my first terrible job at a frozen yogurt shop. There was the park where my friend Sarah and I had spent a whole summer planning our escape from Ohio. There was the turnoff for Northwood, a place I hadn't laid eyes on in 9 years. It all felt smaller somehow, less significant. The landmarks that had once defined my entire world now just looked like any other tired Midwestern suburb. We checked into the Intercontinental Hotel, a palace of polished marble and hushed, expensive silence. As the bellhop led us to a sprawling suite on the top floor with panoramic views of the city, the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The last time I was in this city, I was at the grimy, desolate Greyhound station a few miles away, counting out crumpled dollar bills for a one-way ticket to anywhere but here. The luxury felt absurd, like a costume I was wearing for a part I hadn't yet learned to play. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a year, Susan Evans. My stomach plummeted a sickening lurch of dread and adrenaline. I watched the phone vibrate the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room until it finally stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but a minute later it lit up again. A text message. My hands were trembling as I opened it. Clara Honey. The plane dealer did a whole article about your award. We're so incredibly proud. Your father and I and Leo, of course, will be there tonight to cheer you on. Can't wait to see you, Exo Mom. The cheerful, oblivious word sent an icy chill down my spine. Proud. The word was a lie, a piece of blatant, breathtaking revisionist history. They weren't proud of me. They were proud of the article in the paper, of the name of the award, of the reflected glory. They wanted to stand in a light they had done everything in their power to extinguish. Ethan found me there frozen by the window, my phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, his presence a warm, solid anchor in the swirling storm of my past. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. He just held me. You know, I said, my voice barely a whisper, the last time I was here, I had to sell my grandfather's camera to afford a bus ticket out. Ethan rested his chin on my shoulder, his gaze meeting mine in the reflection on the glass. Well, he murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble in my ear. Tonight you own the whole damn place. Don't you ever forget that? His words didn't erase the dread, but they tempered it with something else, something cold and sharp. Resolve. I wasn't that scared 18-year-old girl anymore. I wasn't a runaway hiding from her past. Tonight, I wasn't coming home as the prodigal daughter begging for scraps of approval. I was returning as a conqueror, and they had no idea what was coming. The grand ballroom of the Intercontinental was a glittering ocean of black-tie professionals. Low light glinted off 1,000 champagne flutes, the air hummed with the quiet, confident murmur of success, and a string quartet played something elegant and vaguely familiar in the corner. It was the kind of event I was used to. Now I knew how to navigate these waters, how to exchange pleasantries, how to network. But being here, in Cleveland, made the air feel thick with ghosts. Ethan's hand, a warm, steady presence on the small of my back, was the only thing keeping me anchored to the present. As we were getting our table assignment, a man with a warm smile and a name tag that read, Charles Vanguard Event Chair, approached us. Clara Evans, he exclaimed, shaking my hand vigorously. So wonderful to finally meet you in person. Your work with Etheria is nothing short of phenomenal, truly. Thank you, Charles, I said, years of practice smoothing over the tremor in my voice. That means a lot. And then across the room I saw them, my family. They had witnessed the exchange, and it was like a starting pistol had gone off. They began to move toward us, a deliberate, purposeful procession across the crowded floor. It wasn't a casual stroll. It was an interception. They looked out of place, like tourists who had wandered into a private club and were trying desperately to blend in. My father, Mark, was stuffed into an ill-fitting rented tuxedo, the sleeves just a little too long, the fabric pulling awkwardly at his shoulders. My mother, Susan, wore a garish fuchsia dress that was a decade out of style, its fussy ruffles a stark contrast to the sleek, understated elegance around her. And Leo, he was there with his fiancée, a pretty nervous-looking girl named Ashley. Leo wore his expensive suit like a costume, his face a tight mask of feigned nonchalance. They descended upon us like a flock of vultures spotting a fresh kill. Clara, there you are! My mother exclaimed, her voice a pitch too high, a brittle social shriek. She lunged forward to air-kiss the space beside my cheek, enveloping me in a cloud of her overpowering floral perfume. "You look wonderful, so sophisticated. This is all just so exciting." She turned to the nervous girl beside her. "Clara, this is Ashley Leo's fiancé. Ashley, this is my daughter Clara. She's the computer genius." Ashley offered a timid, hopeful smile. "It's so amazing to meet you, Clara. Leo's told me so much. A CEO, wow. Your family must be just bursting with pride." Her earnest, innocent words hung in the air, thick with an irony so profound it was almost comical. "We always knew she had it in you," my father boomed, clapping me on the shoulder with a jarring heartiness that made my skin crawl. He then turned to Ashley, as if letting her in on a brilliant trade secret. "You see, Ashley, we knew Clara had this fire, but you can't just coddle that kind of talent. You have to test it, forge it in the flames of hardship, build character. That's what we did. It was tough love." The audacity of it, the sheer, shameless, breathtaking rewriting of history, it left me speechless. He was framing his cruelty as a calculated strategic parenting choice. He was trying to take credit for my survival. Leo, ever the opportunist, stepped forward with a practiced corporate smile. "Seriously, though, the platform is amazing, Clara," he said, trying to sound casual. "You guys are absolutely killing it in the creator economy space. I was just telling my boss at the firm that fintech needs to look at creative IP as a new asset class. Maybe we could grab lunch sometime this week. Talk. Synergy." He wanted to network with me. My own brother, who had silently watched as my world was dismantled, now saw me as a contact, a resource, a potential rung on his own career ladder. They were strangers, wearing the faces of my family, performing a desperate play for an imaginary audience. They saw my success not as something I had painstakingly built from ash and rubble, but as something that now by proximity belonged to them, a new shiny trophy to display in their case, right next to Leo's business degree. And as I stood there watching them, a strange and profound shift happened inside me. The hot, familiar anger that had been simmering for years, it just cooled. The hurt that had been a constant companion for so long simply dissolved. And in its place, a cold, clear, clarifying pity settled in my bones. They weren't monsters. They were just pathetic. Small, desperate people, terrified of their own mediocrity, trying to claim a victory they had no part in winning. They didn't even know who I was, but tonight, they were about to find out. Ethan, who had been watching this whole exchange with a stony, protective silence, leaned in close to my ear. "Are you okay?" he whispered. I looked at the hopeful, oblivious face of my brother's fiancée, at the proud, delusional expressions of my parents, and then I looked back at the one person in the world who truly saw me. A slow, serene smile touched my lips. "I've never been better," I said. The host's voice boomed through the ballroom, amplified and impossibly loud. "And the 2025 Innovator of the Year award goes to Etheria Studios, led by its visionary founder, Clara Evans." The world dissolved into a roar of applause. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. I felt Ethan's hand squeeze mine, a jolt of warm, grounding reality. I turned to him, and in his eyes I saw a universe of pride and love. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Tell your story, Clara." I kissed his cheek, the applause a distant hum, and I made my way to the stage. The single brilliant spotlight followed me like a hunter's beam, bleaching out the faces in the crowd. It was the longest, loneliest walk of my life, but my steps were sure and steady. This wasn't a walk of shame, it was a pilgrimage. Charles Vanguard handed me the award. It was a beautiful, abstract twist of crystal and metal, and it felt heavy and cool in my hands. A tangible piece of my new life. I stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and looked out at the sea of faces. It was a blur, an impressionist painting of tuxedos and gowns, and then my eyes found them. Front row center, my parents and Leo, beaming with a sickening proprietary pride, ready to soak up the glory of a victory they had nothing to do with. My mother was already dabbing at her eyes with a pristine white tissue, the performance of a lifetime. I took a deep breath, the microphone picking up the soft sound. "Thank you," I began, and I was relieved to find my voice was perfectly icily steady. "Thank you to the Vanguard Committee for this incredible honor. Thank you to my amazing team at Etheria, a group of the most brilliant, passionate people I've ever known. And thank you." I paused my gaze, finding Ethan in the crowd, a rock in the swirling sea. Thank you to my partner, my co-founder, and the love of my life, Ethan, without whom literally none of this would be real. I let the polite, warm applause wash over me and then die down. The room was quiet, expectant. I turned my head slightly, my eyes locking directly onto my family. "When you win an award like this," I said, my voice dropping just a little, becoming more intimate, more arresting, "it's traditional to thank the people who supported you from the very beginning, the ones who believed in you before anyone else did." I paused again. I could see my mother preening my father sitting up straighter. But my story is a little different. My journey to this stage didn't begin with a word of encouragement. It began with a slammed door. A quiet, confused ripple went through the audience. I saw my mother's beaming smile falter, replaced by a flicker of confusion. My father's proud expression stiffened into a mask of stone. 9 years ago, I continued, my voice clear and deliberate. I was an 18-year-old girl from a suburb not far from here. I was accepted into my dream school. When I told my parents the good news, they told me that my passion for art and technology was a fantasy. They refused to help. They told me it was time I learned to be independent. They said it was a lesson in tough love. I let the words hang in the charged air. Well, it was certainly a lesson. Independence taught me that a one-way bus ticket to a new city costs $120. It taught me the specific bone-deep exhaustion that comes from working 16 hours on your feet. It taught me the taste of stale coffee at 5 a.m. before a barista shift, and the ache in your back after waiting tables until 2 a.m. It taught me how to budget for a week on $20, and it taught me how to survive on my own, because the people who were supposed to be my safety net were the very reason I was falling. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Leo physically shrinking in his seat, his face ashen. Ashley, his fiancée, was staring at him, her own face, a mask of dawning, horrified confusion. She looked from him to me and back again, the pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed clicking into place. I didn't build Etheria because of that tough love, I declared, my voice ringing now with a clarity that felt like a bell. I built it in spite of it. I built it on a foundation of greasy spoon diner coffee, on late-night study sessions at a community college, and on the unwavering belief of strangers who became my chosen family. Independence, I learned, isn't about being abandoned by the people who should love you. It's about having the courage to build your own path, when the one laid out for you is a dead end. I lifted the heavy crystal award, the stage lights fracturing through it, into 1,000 tiny rainbows. So I want to dedicate this, not to the people who were there at the start, but to the ones who showed up along the way, to the mentors, the friends, the partners who give you a hand up instead of a push down. I scanned the crowd, my voice rising with a passion I didn't know I possessed. And I dedicate this to every young person out there, anyone who has ever been told that their dream is not realistic, that their passion is not a valid career. Your voice matters, your vision is valid, build your own damn door, and then go out and build a whole new world on the other side of it. I stepped back from the microphone. For a single breathless electric moment, there was absolute profound silence. The entire ballroom held its breath. Then one person started clapping, then another, and then the room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a tidal wave of sound, a standing ovation that felt like a physical force washing over me, cleansing me. Through it all, I kept my eyes on the front row. I watched the 3 stunned, horrified, and finally deeply and publicly humiliated faces of the family I had left behind. My father's face was a mottled, furious red. My mother's hand was clasped over her mouth, her carefully constructed performance shattered into a million pieces. And Leo couldn't even look at me. He was staring at the floor, a broken man. My story was finally mine to tell, and the truth had just set me free. I don't remember walking back to my table. I remember the roar of the applause, a physical force that seemed to hold me up. I remember hands reaching out to touch my arm as I passed faces of strangers, looking at me with expressions of shock, respect, and profound empathy. Charles Vanguard, the event chair, intercepted me just before I reached my seat, his own eyes shining. "That was the bravest, most honest speech I have ever heard in this ballroom, Miss Evans," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." And then I was at my table, and Ethan was standing, and he just pulled me into his arms, holding me tight as the ovation continued around us. He didn't say a word. He just held me, and in that embrace I felt the last 9 years of tension, of anger, of hurt, finally begin to uncoil from my spine. We didn't stay. We slipped out a side door during the next award presentation, leaving the glittering spectacle behind. As we waited for the valet, I glanced back through the glass doors. I saw my family still at their table, a miserable island in a sea of celebration. My father was staring grimly into his water glass. My mother seemed to be pleading with him. And Ashley? Ashley was standing talking heatedly to Leo, her face a mask of disillusionment. It was the last I ever saw of them. The next morning the fallout was immediate and spectacular. We sat in our quiet hotel suite, a tablet between us as the digital world exploded. Forbes, CEO's viral speech redefines tough love. TechCrunch, Etheria founder's powerful rebuke to unsupportive parents. My phone was a nuclear meltdown of notifications from friends, from colleagues, from strangers. There was a long, rambling email from Leo. It was a bizarre, pathetic cocktail of a half-hearted apology and wounded pride. I guess we were hard on you, but you have no idea the position you've put me in. Dad is furious. Ashley won't even talk to me. Was it really worth it, Clara, to humiliate your own family on stage just to make yourself feel powerful? I read his words so dripping with self-pity and a complete lack of awareness, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. I deleted it without a reply. There was also a 3-minute voicemail from my mother. I pressed play, and the unmistakable sound of her theatrical gulping sobs filled the silent room. "Clara, honey, how could you do this to us? After everything we—" I listened for 5 seconds, and then my finger found the delete button. And as the message vanished, I realized something profound. I felt nothing. No anger, no residual sadness, just a quiet, peaceful emptiness where that old, festering wound used to be. The power they held over me was completely, finally gone. On our last morning in Cleveland, Ethan and I sat at a quiet table in the hotel restaurant. The sky outside was still a familiar, stubborn gray, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It was just a sky. He raised his coffee cup, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "To the innovator of the year," he toasted. I clinked my cup against his, the ceramic making a satisfying sound. "To building your own damn door," I replied. On the flight back to Austin, I put my head on his shoulder and fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep I'd had in a decade. I didn't dream of angry fathers or weeping mothers. I dreamt of lines of code and vibrant palettes of color, of new features for Etheria, of the future we were building together. Back in Austin, the sun was shining. When I walked into the office, my team greeted me with a roar of cheers and a ridiculous, oversized congratulations card signed by everyone. "We saw the speech online, Clara," my lead engineer said, her eyes shining with pride. "We're all so damn proud of you. This was my family. This was my home." That evening, Ethan and I stood on the balcony of our apartment looking out at the city that had saved me. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant strokes of fiery orange and deep purple, the colors of a digital masterpiece. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. I thought for a long moment. I thought of the scared 18-year-old girl on the Greyhound bus, terrified and alone. I thought of the years of struggle, the moments of despair when I almost surrendered. I thought of the faces of my parents in that ballroom stripped of their power, their false narrative shattered for all to see. "No," I said, my voice clear and certain, as I leaned back into him. "Not a single one." My father had told me to be independent, and so I was. I was independent of his judgment of my mother's manipulations of my brother's envy. I was independent of the past they had tried to write for me. I had finally completely written my own story, and the best part was, I was just getting to the good chapters. The horizon was wide open, and it was all mine. That's my story. It's strange looking back on it all now. That moment on stage holding that award, it might have looked like an act of revenge, but the truth is, it had nothing to do with them anymore. It had everything to do with me. It was about taking back the microphone of my own life and telling the story in my own voice, not the one they had written for me. For years, I believed my value was something they held in their hands. They could grant it with a word of praise or take it away with a dismissive glance. I thought that if I just worked hard enough, if I just became successful enough, I could finally earn it from them. But the most important lesson I learned, a lesson that took me a decade of struggle to understand, is that you can't beg for worth from people who are incapable of seeing it. You have to build it yourself. That night in Cleveland wasn't about tearing them down. It was about me finally standing on the foundation I had built with my own two hands and realizing it was strong enough. It didn't need their approval to be real, and that leads me to something I hold as a core truth now. Your worth is not a reflection you see in your family's eyes. It is the structure you build with your own two hands. My story is mine, but I know that in so many ways it's a universal one. It makes me wonder, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever had a passion or a dream that the people closest to you just didn't understand? How did you find the strength to pursue it anyway? And what about the idea of tough love? It's a phrase we hear all the time, but when does tough love cross the line from building character into simply being an excuse for cruelty? I'm genuinely curious to know what you think the difference is. Finally, and most importantly, who has been your doctor? Sharma, or your Ethan, who was that unexpected person, a teacher, a friend, a partner who showed up and believed in you when you needed it most? Sometimes the family we find along the way becomes the bedrock of who we are. If this story made you think about your own journey, leave a comment. I'll be reading them. If you have a different opinion on any of this, please share it in the comments below. Honest conversation is how we all grow. And if you connect with stories about overcoming obstacles and forging your own path, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next.